Welcome to the Navigating the Post-Cookie Era webinar. Yeah, a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. We have in the bottom of your screen, you can see a button with Q&A. If you have any questions along the way, because you won't be able to interrupt us, you can post your questions here, and then we'll take them at the end. So yeah, that's an important bit of housekeeping. My name is Richard van der Velde. I'm the Senior Technical Support Specialist at Usercentrics, and with me today I have Ed, the founder of Cookie Info.
Yes, I'm here.
We are doing this a little bit in an unusual fashion. We decided it would be more fun if this thing was, instead of just me just jabbering on and dividing slides amongst ourselves, we're kind of sort of like make it into a conversation. So I'll be going through the slides and doing a little bit of talking, and then Ed will interrupt me and make some some additional comments, or he will ask something, or so we're trying something new here. So I hope you will enjoy this new approach. So on the agenda today, the case for data privacy, what does the world look like today? A little bit about legislation, a little bit about trust, very important. How to optimize your data. Then we're going to sum that all up with some key takeaways, and then we'll have time for the Q&A, which you can post in the bottom of your screen. So where are we today? So there's a lot of changes happening in the last couple of years. You can see that the users are getting more and more aware of the value of their data, and they understand that they have certain rights tied to that data. So you can see a lot of these press releases that there are trial cases where even bigger players like Meta, well, Meta is a target of a lot of trial cases, but the bigger players are starting to get sued and are paying fines. So all these changes, they happen from three major players. That's the regulators. That's, for example, the EU Commission, local data legislatures, the tech players themselves. These are like the big tech companies. You know the ones: Meta, Google, Alphabet. Yeah, these guys. And of course you and me, the consumers. Basically what we want is what the legislation will be based on, and the tech players will obviously the law of supply and demand, they'll pretty much do what we are willing to pay for.
Yeah. So, Richard, in regard to that, one of the things that we saw this year, of course, was in the beginning of January, a lot of fuss and rumor with Google announcing that they needed to start complying with the DMA, and therefore starting to enforce Google Consent Mode version 2 on us. Did you see any impact on your end about that?
Yes, a major impact actually. Basically, what we normally like when I work in support, right? So we can measure all kinds of reactions from the market by how many support cases we get, and normally we would have somewhere in the 150 200 support cases weekly. And when DMA really became a big topic, that skyrocketed to almost 250 daily. So we struggled a lot to sort of like keep up with all the questions, and they were all about okay, how do I do this? Is this included in my subscription? Is this do I have to do this? And how does it work? And where can I find resources?
Yeah.
So despite the fact that Google was very they pushed it pretty hard, they didn't really provide users with sort of like the means to fix the problem. So basically, us and probably you as well, we're just flooded with some questions about like, okay, what is this, and do I have to do this, and what happens if I don't?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was amazing because, of course, Google has been sort of announcing it along the way during last year already, and but it took a lot of people by surprise that consent mode was now certainly going to be necessary. But I guess we'll get into that a little bit later on in our presentations.
Definitely,
So
yes.
yeah, interesting. Please continue.
So as I mentioned already, legislations are popping up all across the board. For the first few years, it was mainly the GDPR, which affected the Europeans, and of course the first United States legislation in California, the CCPA. But since then, there's been legislations popping up in China and Brazil and South Africa, Canada, Japan, multiple in the US. They're literally popping up all over the place. Also the because one thing is having legislations, right? But the other thing is enforcement. Let's say that I know that there is zero chance that I ever get caught speeding, then I will drive very, very fast. I might know that it's not legal, but hey, it has no consequence. And I like seeing landscapes flashing by me and being faster at places. So yeah, I'll speed. But so you can see up until about August 2021, not much was happening. I mean, there were some fines, but we're still talking well below 500 million, which across the board isn't a lot. And that simply skyrocketed. And this only goes up to November 23. I don't have the latest numbers, but this is only going up. Especially the big players are being scrutinized now, and they are really getting fined for hefty amounts.
Yeah, I see
Um,
that. I see those things in the market as well that you read about it, but I also get a lot of questions from users that say, okay, what's the chance going to be that I'm going to be fined?" So yeah, from the legislators' point of view, they'll go after the big guys, of course.
yeah.
But if you look at the smaller users, people say, well, do I really need to start working with a consent banner in order to get consent on the use of cookies, of course? And what is the chance going to be? But I mean, the fines are one part of the equation, of course, but I think emphasizing on privacy, which is another use case, of course, for users to actually trust your data. I mean, that would be an interesting point of view as well, I guess.
Yeah, what I always thought about is that, just a few years back, it was still the Wild West. You could do pretty much whatever you wanted. There was no real legislation. And people didn't really understand it because it all started with these cookie banners that basically just said we have cookies and then an OK button, and that was fully legal at the time. And back then it just seemed kind of silly because it was sort of like, well, yeah, okay, well, you might as well just written that, okay, we have servers somewhere. It didn't really make any sense. So as legislation became a little bit more sensible, maybe, and more concrete, I think sort of like the understanding also improved, and still for a lot of people, because most of us are easily old enough to remember the time when none of this was necessary. So also we user-centrics in general, and also in CookieBot, we always talk about privacy by design, and by that we mean is that currently you usually have your entire your entire setup already done, and then afterwards you start thinking about, oh yeah, privacy, and then it becomes this weird little thing that you sort of like have to put on top of it, and sort of like, and it doesn't really work. But if you take the principles of privacy by design, then basically from the drawing board, you start paying attention to this, and it should actually be quite natural, because if you for example, if you construct a building, then there's also certain laws you have to abide by. So you can't build your building and then afterwards, like, oh yeah, are the is the wiring actually up to legal standards, and is there actually any airflow in here, and could you escape in case of a fire, and what materials have we used. So I think in the coming years it will become more of a natural thing, and people will get more used to it, because right now it's still sort of like this weird thing that we don't really understand. And I also think that again, from a design point of view, we sort of like forget that we are on one side of the equation, so we're like we're the ones that collect the data.
Mhm.
But in our normal lives, we're also actually the ones to provide data, because I don't know about you, but I do a lot of online shopping. There's I buy almost all my things online, and then my data is also harvested, and I of course also have an opinion on that.
Yeah, yeah. So the harvesting of data or obtaining data, of course, is primarily of interest for marketeers, but the marketeers are being like challenged to comply with the privacy spectrum. So yeah, let's dive more into that during this session, because I think that's one of the takeaways that we want to give the viewers today.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yes.
we like data. We like working with data. We want to optimize the data, and we want to see how we can well, get the best of the data, of course. So yeah, interesting.
Yes. So yeah, quite recently, the Digital Markets Act went into force, and this basically shifted the focus from you, the marketeer, to well, the big tech players, because previously these big tech players, they could just provide their service and they didn't really have to worry about complying to any rules or regulations or whatever. That was sort of like your responsibility. So what DMA in essence does, it does a lot, but the important part is that now these six players, Alphabet, known from Google, Amazon, well, from servers and shopping, Apple, well, don't need to explain that, ByteDance, that's TikTok, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Microsoft specifically, their LinkedIn platform. These players are now required to ensure that they actually have a valid consent signal before they start providing their service. So, and if they don't, they get fined. So I like that part, that now they have skin in the game, and then now they'll make sure that things are legal. So there's less pressure on you as the person using their services to make sure that that's legal. Um,
So yeah, it shifted to you as your website owner, right? So you want to play along with these big platforms. You have to provide the valid consent signal. At least Google
yes.
is very far in that part. But I see you're going to tell us about Microsoft and Meta, what they're up to. So
Well, yeah, but you're absolutely right. Google has been the one that was very much in the forefront of this, and I think what was convenient is actually consent mode existed already prior to DMA.
yeah,
Back then, when we worked with Google, it was very much focused on storage types. So basically, your browser storage, and then specifically analytical purposes or ad purposes, and then you could give or withdraw consent for that. But then when DMA went into force, that suddenly became a very useful tool for sort of like well, I consider this sort of like a consent API. So they basically expanded on it, hence version 2. And now they also could sort of like say something about, can I use personalized data? Can I use targeted advertising? And what we can see is that okay, so Google was an early mover and has fully adopted it. It works like a charm. Microsoft has already made a similar thing. Now, the screenshot is much too small, but it is remarkably similar. It's basically
yeah,
you have a global property and you push data to there in the exact same format even. So it seems that they've been copying the notes from Google,
yeah.
and Meta has done a very similar thing. It like the approach is very much the same. And what I'm personally hoping on is that basically consent mode will sort of like be a global standard, just like the transparency and consent framework is for this is mostly for publishers,
Mhm.
but where we basically have a universal consent signal that they can use to because one of the cool things about Google consent mode is you can either use it as sort of like an on and off switch, but you can also use it in such a way that the tags adjust their behavior.
Yeah.
And only Google tags can do that today. But it would be great if Facebook or if LinkedIn Insights or any of these services could do something similar, where they basically can run in restricted mode or in full functionality mode, if you would want to call it that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really hoping that this is going to be sort of like a general universal consent mechanism.
I doubt it if they'll shake hands on it with each other, but let's see what happens.
Well, they might meet somewhere in the middle, but as you could see, they're basically copying the idea. So it wouldn't take a lot of work to sort of like maybe create something on top of it that sort of like pushes it out a bit. Because yeah, this is thinking out loud. How I would tackle it is basically look, okay, what services are there, and then basically adjust the syntax. And these are minors. It's basically what objects are you pushing to. Even the values are the same. It's just it would be super easy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, let's see what happens in the near future on this.
Yeah,
Let's go
well,
on
I'm
to the
sure.
next topic, Richard, the trust part.
Yes,
Why are
trust.
we addressing this?
Well, because basically on the internet, trust is everything. If you don't trust a website, you're not going to place orders there. You're not going to provide data. You're not going to do anything. And something I like to sort of like a little story I like to tell is or like more like an analogy. Like imagine I walk up to you in the street, guy with barely any hair, big beard, not too friendly looking, and I come over to you and say like, hey, can I use your phone? You would most likely be like, no, I prefer to keep it. Thank you very much. And I wouldn't blame you because you don't know me. You don't know what I'm gonna do with it. Now we change the scenario. I still look the same. I'm still at the same demeanor. Now I come up to you and say, my phone ran out of batteries. I'm late home from work, and I just want to call my daughter and tell her that I'm on my way and that she doesn't have to worry. Can I use your phone for that? Now the odds of me actually getting your phone is a lot higher because now
Yeah.
you know exactly what I intend to do with it. You might even have an opinion on whether or not this is like a legitimate use of your phone. So this sort of like shows you like by being open and upfront and honest, you can get things that you normally would not.
Yep.
And here are some nice pie charts that sort of like also tell you like people will delete apps if they feel like, hey, this thing isn't really it's spying on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
They also say like it could actually make people not want to use a certain product, service, or even like a company's whatever a company provides, if they don't trust them, if they feel they're shady.
Yeah. Yeah.
They also say that they will likely choose a competitor that does care about their privacy. And yeah, it does a little bit for brand loyalty and yeah, trusting brands if they feel comfortable using them.
Yeah. But that's easy because I mean, there are certain platforms that you just can't get around. But so you're telling us you need to be aware of your privacy, of course, and the experience around that. But I think part of using a consent mechanism or cookie banner on your website is also going to help you take care of that. But we'll dive into that a little bit later.
Yeah, exactly. It's by yeah. We'll get into it a little bit later, but basically you are just conveying that hey, see, this is what I'm intending to do, and there's nothing shady about what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
so again, this slide is also, it goes a little bit against it. Uh, a data breach is bad, right? So if you hear like one of your providers has just leaked all of your data, that could make you say like, okay, well, I'll just use a competing solution then.
Yeah.
And like poor privacy experience can be the same thing. If they feel like, okay, you are just harvesting all my data, and I don't know what you're harvesting and what who you're selling it to, then they might choose something else. Whereas on the other hand, like these are measurements done by Google, so I assume they have good data. They can see that they at least have a lot of it. So they've tried a lot of things, like also like the monetary incentive. So basically, trying to pay people for giving data. Now the thing is, people realize that their data is valuable, but they don't really understand how. Like I can't go on the street and just go up to a person like, hey, buddy, you wanna buy my age, my name, like I don't know, my shoe size. They
Yeah.
won't, they wouldn't even give a penny for that. But we get that our data is valuable, but we don't understand how. And the reason for that is it is like fractions of a cent, but they're at times gazillions. So so it's a lot of money.
Yep.
Yeah, and people like having like a feeling that they're sort of like, they have a say in things. So then always comes the big question. So okay, should I gut my income and ruin all my data just to give all these people their rights? They can actually just go hand in hand. You don't have to sort of like sacrifice one for the other. It's not like, okay, either we harvest the living shit out of you and don't give a shit about your privacy, or like we're being super mindful and then we get nothing. There are ways to get it both ways. So obviously, what should you do? One thing is like make a good, well, and that we've taken care of that, but like in this case, a cookie banner, make a easy to understand mechanism that has all the information they need, easy to use, doesn't sort of like try to push them in one way or the other. That in itself is already sort of like a clear indication of I care. I'm on the level. Like this is what I want. I do want your data. We're honest about that. And this is what I intend to do with it. Because if you don't know what, if you don't know what I'm going to do with your data, it becomes hard to sort of like have an opinion on that. And to show you, again, I like telling stories. to show you how data can be benign or harmful is and I don't know if this is a true story, but I've heard it from someone and I thought it was charming. A contractor in the Netherlands, he had bought an old apartment in Amsterdam, and he wanted to renovate that so he could rent it out. So the man goes to work. He starts tearing down walls and tearing out ceilings, and then suddenly from one of the ceilings, a whole bunch of books comes tumbling down. And of course, he's curious. He's like, "Whoa, what are these books and why are they hidden in the ceiling?" So he starts going through them, and they appear to be just sort of like an address book with just some names and addresses and stuff like that. Perfectly benign stuff. And then he starts digging a little deeper, and it turns out that these people were actually they were Jewish people around the 1930s. So this was like an address book, probably from a rabbi that wanted to keep in touch with his um, yeah, what do you call it, congregation? And then as the Nazis started invading the entirety of Europe, he suddenly realizes, oh my God, my address book has now become a hit list.
Oh, yeah,
Uh, so
yeah.
this sort of like illustrates like the data you collect can be perfectly benign, but it could also be kind of dangerous.
Yep.
Uh, and maybe something that's closer to home, like liking posts on Twitter. Like you can have liked something 10 years ago that you don't agree with anymore, and it has become sort of like yeah, let's say a hot topic. There's tons of examples of this, and I'll not go into specific ones because these are delicate times. But just to say, like things that you've provided earlier can come back to haunt you, and people
Absolutely.
realize that they're very aware of, okay, my data can be used against me. So it's
Yeah,
important that they have your promise, I suppose, that this is what I'm going to use it for. I'm just trying to figure out if this ad brought me more views, if
yeah,
this if this partner where I had my ad sort of like brought me a lot of eyeballs. Yeah, that is perfectly benign, but people need to be told that.
yeah. In regard to X, it's called at least now
Oh yeah.
Twitter. I thought I read they are now not showing your likes anymore to other users. So
Yeah, so
they're,
you can now like things anonymously. It,
yeah,
it
yeah,
is it is kind of sad that it got that way, but I do understand that. And it's kind of also like an absurd situation that you have to literally think about, okay, am I allowed to publicly like this, or could this cost me my job?
yeah,
So again, data can be, and liking is also a data submission in essence.
yeah. Okay, but we're trying to figure out how we still do get data
Exactly.
in a
Uh,
privacy-friendly way, and making sure that the tools we are using, that we optimize them to collect data based on consent, of course. So I guess what's the next topic on your end on this, Richard?
yeah. Um, just before I move on from this, as many of you know, third-party cookies are going to be discontinued. This is
Yep.
something we also have to sort of like keep in mind. We'll go into depth about later. And again, don't bundle monetary incentives with privacy products. So don't try to buy someone's privacy. It's not going to work. You're going to get the opposite effect. So like I said, cookies are in a lot of browsers, they're already restricted. So you have third-party cookies have already been discontinued in 2016 by Brave, and then by Safari in 18, Firefox in 19. And okay, this slide is apparently now up to date because it's been pushed to 2025. But at some point in the very near future, Google and Edge is basically it's the same framework. So when Google goes over, so does Microsoft Edge. They're both Chromium browsers. There at some point are going to discontinue third-party cookies completely,
Yeah.
but they've already done some things. One thing that people don't seem to be very aware of is a feature called storage partitioning. Now, this came into play a couple of months ago, and when it first hit the market, I personally wasn't aware. I just suddenly saw our consent sharing mechanism that we use to sort of like share consents between domains breaking suddenly, and we had no idea why. In some cases, it still worked, and in some cases, it didn't. Now, by a lot of trial and error, I created this little diagram here. And what it appears to do is that domains that are siblings or are on the same level, they can still share consent, third-party cookies among each other. And they can also share it to their parent, but the parent can't share it with its children, and it can't share it with anything that is not the same top-level domain.
Yeah.
Now, in this little situation, actually, this diagram isn't correct because in reality, It's not cookiebot.com, it's www.cookiebot.com, which actually means that it's on the same level as support.cookiebot.com and admin.cookiebot.com and consent.cookiebot.com. So we can still share our data using third-party cookies. But we've also figured out a workaround where we can just use a first-party cookie for that. But these are sort of the limitations that exist today. But keep in mind, this is gonna be like it's gonna be all crosses in the near future. So keep it in mind and don't rely on third-party cookies for your business. Now the interesting part, optimizing your data. So let's start with the interface design, because I think that's an easy thing to understand. And for one, I just took a completely normal random banner from Cookiebot, and this one is completely compliant with every single law in the EU, because in Italy you're required to have that little cross in the top right, but nowhere else. So it wouldn't make sense for you to have it, for example, in the Netherlands or in Germany or in Denmark, because you actually, in this case, you now have one opt-in and 3 opt-outs, because if you click the cross, you opt out. If you say, oh, okay, the left one says only necessary cookies, that's an opt-out. The middle one says allow selection, but the selection is all off. So there's 3 opt-outs versus 1 opt-in.
No.
So if we're just going by, okay, random buttons, you have a 25% chance of getting an opt-in. That is not good. So what I would suggest is make sure that you understand the legislation you're catering to. So Cookiebot can detect where your user is visiting from. Basically, it looks at the IP address, compares it to a third-party provider, and they figure out, okay, you are, well, in my case, in Denmark, so that little cross is not necessary. Pre-check boxes, I think, are still illegal in most of the EU.
Yeah.
But technically, I don't have to have the opt-out button. I can say allow selection and allow all cookies, because essentially I have made it just as easy for you to opt in or out, and that is the rule. It must be just as easy to opt in as opt out.
Yeah.
So make sure that you cater to your personal legislation.
Yeah, so this is one of the interesting things that you can actually do within in Cookiebot, right? You can allocate the look and feel of your cookie banner to certain countries, well, depending on from where the visitor comes. And if you're only operating in a local market, you tend to just use well, an interface of the cookie banner for your specific country. But once you're doing business abroad, yeah, it can really benefit you in obtaining those consents, because we want, as a marketeer, at least, I have a marketing background. As a marketeer, I want to collect as much possible data. So I want to see people hitting that accept all button, of course. So you're talking about the banner now. You're probably going to go into some further points of design, but yeah, let's do that first, and then I'll come with some things that we see with our users.
Yeah. So also like make it your own, add your own logo and colors. Now this might seem like just a novelty thing, but basically we're talking about trust again. If the user trusts you, then they only have to think about you. So if it has your logo and your color, then it is your trust that suddenly becomes the focal point. But if you have this one, the generic Cookiebot one, then that's suddenly a new player. And then the customer has to think about, they might not know Cookiebot at all. And then they might know you and they trust you, but that banner on top, that's not you. That's someone else. And they don't know how they feel about that. And that can actually cost you your opt-in.
Yeah.
So definitely match your look and feel. I mean, the easy part is just, matching colors and a logo. But if you have the skills or are willing to pay a reseller like Ed, they can build you a custom banner that is completely part of your website. And then basically you don't have to get trust for 2 different parties.
That's
probably what I'm trying to say. The generic texts are generic and not very appealing. I've seen people make really cool stories about this, like, "Hey, would you like a cookie?" or something like. They basically make it a little bit fun, and they sort of like appeal to the audience, because yes, that you do have to tell them like what is this thing you're looking at and what is it used for, but you don't have to do it in such a dry cut way as we've chosen to do it, because it had to appeal to everyone. So definitely personalize the banner as much as you can. Don't over comply. Don't use bottom or top bars. People are always like, yeah, but then they're not in the way. And that's exactly the problem, because then you can just ignore them and you can just keep navigating the website and then you don't have your opt-in, because as long as they don't opt in, your marketing services are still blocked. That's what
Yeah,
Google
that's
says.
that's one of the tips I'd like to give the audience as well. I mean, consider putting that banner in the center of your screen, of course, because yeah, I mean the website needs to be accessible in most countries during your visit until you've given consent, of course. But if you have a banner that pops up from the bottom or the top down or whatever, it's going to be difficult to to get people to make a choice, of course. So yeah, getting that opt-in is very or opt-out, of course, is I mean but it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Lastly, understanding user experience. As you can see here, the button we want them to click is a solid color, and the other ones are like the inverse. And we call these call to action buttons. And you have a primary and a secondary, and that basically is like you show them what you would prefer them to do without actually pushing them. So now we're going into what you don't want to do, and that's dark patterns. Now I've literally made this thing like almost like a parody of itself. I've made the text completely opaque, so you don't actually know what is this thing I'm looking at here. It's like, oh, it's just a random survey, not important. And the toggles don't even have labels, so you have no idea what that is. There's even a tab saying nothing to see here. I would click that immediately, but it's meant to be ridiculous, right?
No.
And here, like these colors, because that's also an important thing. The thing we did before, blue is a neutral color. People don't have strong feelings about white and blue. Well, they might, but generally speaking, no. But green and red, however, do. Like red is usually a negative thing. And I've even put like here, like I even put like a little challenge here. I'm a horrible person. If you click this, you are a bad individual. That is nudging.
Excuse me.
And you shouldn't do that. The same thing with the green button. I'm a good person. Well, everyone thinks they're a good person, so obviously they're going to click that button. I, again, the kind of person I am, I would really be tempted to press the whatever button, but I still get what I want because I pre-checked the toggles. So here I'm using what they call dark patterns. So I make it harder for you, or unappealing at least, to do what I don't want you to do. And people see through that. I think it's very important to be empathetic when doing these things. What would get you to press yes, and what would make you say no? If I get the feeling that you're trying to push me in a certain direction, especially if that's something that might not benefit me, then I'm going to go out of my way to say no. In most cases, most websites, I also just opt in. Most users do. But if I see a banner where it's almost impossible to opt out, I will use tons of time figuring out how that solution works. And if I can't figure out how to disconnect it, then or like how I can like opt out, then I will literally go into the JavaScript, block the resource, and like you will not get what you want.
You are very thorough in your privacy approach, Richard.
I'm just yeah, it's a little bit of a work damage, but also like I'm also kind of a horrible person. I
All
would
right, all
that
right.
button. So what can we do? There's a couple of interesting options. Server-side tagging. So basically, you can get around the whole third-party cookie problem by just going server-side, because people then go into your area where you can set your cookie on your end of of
Yeah. I'll
spectrum.
explain a little bit more later on, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely something you can because this is again was really your area. A little bit about Google consent mode. We've already talked a little bit about it, but I'll go a little bit in depth. And then there's I purposely didn't make this one bold because I'm not sure how this is going to go. So customer match, basically, this is very Google. So basically, from these services that you use, your YouTube and Gmail and Maps and well, all their services, they collect data, and then basically you can sort of like, yeah, I guess sign up to sort of like cohorts. So you can get assigned people that are likely fall into that cohort, that group of people that share certain commonalities and are likely to want your services. People aren't very excited about it, and it's also kind of opaque. So I'm kind of skeptical. Single sign-on is sort of like a similar thing. You've seen this. Like for example, I like running. So I have an app where I can use my Facebook profile to log in, or my Google profile. And there's a lot of things where you can do this, where you can use a platform, typically Facebook, Google in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
where you use what that becomes your single sign-on, and then again they can server side track you. Um,
Yeah, I'm very conscious on the single sign-on thing into different applications because it goes over different platforms as well. So
yes.
you definitely don't know what's happening there. But I mean, it's convenient, or it sounds convenient, but yeah, you have to be aware of what's happening there. So yeah, let's see
Yeah,
how
and
it
the
goes.
problem it's not very transparent because we actually don't know like okay, but what data is actually moving there. So what I like about server-side tagging opposed to single sign-on is it happens on your server,
Yeah.
whereas with single sign-on it happens on well, the Google server or Facebook server or you don't know what they're actually collecting and what they're doing with it. So it's sort of like it's related to server-side tagging, but there are some things that make me sort of like be hesitant about it. But who knows?
Okay.
This is definitely your area, Ed.
Well,
So I'd say take over from me here.
Well, it's not definitely my area. Well, it is my area for a certain part, of course. So we are a user-centric cookiebot reseller. We're pretty good at it because we work with a lot of customers throughout Europe and even the world. So we tend to help end users, small website owners, web shops, agencies, but also corporates. So we have a broad spectrum of customers that we're helping. So we're helping them get consent right, based for a large part on the cookiebot solution. And on top of that, we do customization of the cookiebot cookie banner so that it really gets applied to your look and feel, and to help you get better data of pure out of the cookie banner. So that's one of the parts that we do. But as we see that things are changing, I mean, we've been hearing about the end of third-party cookies for years now. Um, but well, okay, it's been postponed again until 2025. But in the meantime, I think it's already interesting to see what you can do if you start working with like first-party data. Um, we've cooked up a way to support customers with that, and we've called that Datameister. So within Cookie Info, we can help you either with the cookiebot solution, but if you want to move towards first-party data, then server-side tagging, of course, becomes interesting. And for that, we use Taggers as a solution, as one of our partners. So we enable you to get to the next step. So why do we think then that first-party data is interesting? Because like consent mode is a way to contain data, and we do want to do some conversion modeling, etc. We've discussed that briefly already, but the client and the server side, that's where the crux is. So usually you would load the code either directly into your website to do tracking and tracing, or you would use Google Tag Manager to take that task from you. Or you can find a way to shift it through Google Tag Manager based on server-side tagging. So now if you open a website, normally all tags and triggers would be loaded, depending on consent, of course. But if you put in server-side tagging, you get a separate Google Tag Manager container, which is then hosted on a separate domain. So you're actually bypassing the stuff that's happening in the browser. So why is that interesting? Because, well, we get better event data, and also the thing that we want to optimize in campaigns are, of course, conversions. So if you look at that part, getting better data in regard to conversions, you can now actually start reporting better in your campaigns because nowadays the third-party cookies are blocked more and more. So you might have a conversion on your website, but it doesn't get sent back to your campaign because the cookies were blocked or there was a time limit. So if you take that part and route it through the server-side tagging, you can get better measurements or more measurements, better measurements, and allocate it to your budget where you're spending it in your campaigns. And I think that's an interesting thing. So that puts server-side tagging like in the middle of collecting data, because that's what, as marketeers, of course, we all want to achieve. So there's scattered solutions out there, but I think server-side tagging in this regard would make it very interesting for marketeers to investigate and start working with. So that's my brief explanation on this, Richard. I hope you can follow that one.
Oh yeah, definitely. So yeah, it basically solves some issues that the phasing out of third-party cookies have. It won't replace the need for client-side scripting, because yeah, again, like clicks and scrolls and stuff, you can't measure that server side, but you can capture them client side and then send them server side.
Yep.
A little bit about consent mode. We've already talked about it. Essentially, it just takes the consent that you submit on a banner, translate it to a format that Google understands, and it pushes it towards it. So that's what Cookiebot uses it for. Literally just as a translator for our consent to Google Tag Manager, so it can fire tags or not fire them, or fire them in restricted mode. And the cool thing is that if you use advanced consent mode, so basically here a service, let's call them services. A service will always load, but depending on the consent, it will have certain abilities. So if somebody just accepts, then it will work exactly as you've always wanted it to. It just captures everything, and it works. Now, if somebody objects, well, like in basic mode, the service would just not run and you wouldn't get any data at all. But now, if with advanced consent mode, it can just use anonymized data, and then with some modeling, it can well, they say up to 65% of your data remains intact. How that exactly works is of course the chef's secret. But we do see that data is a lot better. And again, if somebody opts out, particularly if you're a poorly trusted company, that exists. Like some and it might not even be your own fault, but we know, for example, that providers of medication, they're not very well trusted. Banks, there are certain sectors that are just they suffer from poor user trust, and there's not much you can do about that. Others, like for example, sports brand, Under Armour, Nike, Adidas, doesn't matter. They get opt-ins. People generally trust them because it seems perfectly benign. So yeah, definitely consent mode can help you retain a lot of data, and it's a requirement anyway, because since DMA, Google will just not provide their service if you don't provide a consent signal.
Yeah, that can you go one slide back, Richard?
Yeah.
That last part, I mean, yes, Google is asking website owners who want to do Google Ads or use a combination of their services that you send this valid consent signal. But in regard to the modeling, I believe there is a threshold on when that modeling actually starts happening, right?
Yeah.
So what I think, okay, Google Consent Mode, it seems to be a nice solution, but the smaller parties advertising in the market are being well, squeezed, I guess. At least that's what we hear from a lot of users, because they're just not in that modeling part yet.
Yeah, I think to be perfectly blunt and honest about it, the biggest winner of consent mode is of course Google themselves.
Yeah.
Because you get your data, but they also get your data and everyone else's data as well. So they can collect that data, and when it comes to modeling, more is better. The more data you have, the more accurate your models will be. And for Google, that means their models are going to be absolutely spot on, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Ed said, if you have a relatively small company, let's say like a small web store that sells, I don't know, something, then your modeling might not help you much, because like Ed said, there's definitely a certain threshold from which this becomes more interesting. And again, the more data you get, the better the modeling is. It's like with statistics. If you have a couple of measurements, it's not going to be very accurate. But if you have thousands and thousands of measurements, it becomes very accurate.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the number was, but I have to look it up. We'll share it later on in the comments, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's also another good incentive to start with server-side tagging, of course.
Yes, definitely. Um, Again, consent mode is also now a requirement by Google. So one thing is that it helps you with your if you had a lot of opt-outs to maintain your data, and it also was a convenient way of binary loading of tags. But it's also now a requirement for DMA. So it's yeah it's a lifesaver in that regard, and it was actually quite fortunate that Google already had something already on the table when it hit. A little bit about basic and advanced. I already kind of sort of like went into it, but not really. So this diagram basically shows if somebody consents, then everything works completely as normal. Now, if somebody has denied consent and a tag runs in basic mode, then basically the tag is just completely blocked. Nothing happens. But in advanced consent mode, then the tag, okay, it won't use cookies and it won't send personal data and it will not use targeted advertising, but it can still work. It can still use cohorts and the models to so again, now I can't see, hey, you are a cat person and you actually own a cat and you like Whiskas, so now I'm gonna send you Whiskas commercials. But they can sort of like probably, okay, hey, this is a cat owner, because you're part of that cohort. So it and with advanced and advanced and basic is basically how you set up a tag, and this only goes for Google tags. Unfortunately, for all third-party tags, Hotjar, Meta, LinkedIn Analytics, doesn't matter. They can only use basic. So it's either you need to get those opt-ins. If you have Google, like Google Ads, Google Analytics, Floodlight, then advanced mode becomes an option. And the cool thing is, if you didn't configure your tags, then they use advanced mode by default. Like basic, it's kind of counterintuitive, but there you have to configure a tag specifically to require consent to fire. So if you do use Google right now, odds are you're already using advanced consent mode. Some key takeaways. Hopefully you sort of like got with all my storytelling that you can actually leverage the collection of consent into showing like, hey, I'm a trustworthy person. Give me your data. I'll be careful with it. This is kind of a headache. You do need to know what you're dealing with. So if you have, if you're serving to different countries, you need to make sure that you understand what the rules are and then comply to the, yeah, it's going to sound bad, to the minimum extent. You don't want to be over compliant. Like if I'm in a car, I put on one seatbelt, but I don't put on one of these racing harnesses and like one of these metal straps that you have in like in these destruction derby kind of vehicles. Like just do what you're required to do and no more. Like we've been talking extensively about this. Third-party cookies are going to go at some point. It's true. We've been talking about this for years and it's been pushed forward and forward, but at some point the hammer is going to fall and then it's over. We can already see it's limited. A lot of browsers already don't support it anymore. Google does have more than half of the browsers, but it's still like best start planning ahead. It's gonna happen. Consent mode, it's a must-have. It's very easy to use. There's tons of resources on support.cookiebot.com that show you how to set it up. And like I said, if you didn't configure anything, odds are you're already using it anyway, and you're using it in advanced mode, which is probably what you want anyway. Who can help you do all of this stuff? Well, Ed, obviously from Cookie Info, and we can help you as well on Cookiebot, support.cookiebot.com.
Yeah.
And now a little bit of a shameless plug. We've just released a privacy policy generator, which you can find on cookiebot.com/en/ and then privacy policy generator, or scan the little helpful QR code in my little graphic there.
Yeah, hold on here, Richard. Two things on this. I mean, happy to be on this webinar, of course, and I hope people get some sense of the direction where things are moving in. I've added this link in regard to our ebooks overview. So I understand that people are not really always equipped to start doing stuff right away. But if you want some background info on server-side tagging or how to get better data from your cookie banner, we have different ebooks on the topics so that you can read them over the weekend and then decide on the next Monday that you want to start. So that's a good starting point for folks. And in regard to the privacy policy generator, I'm really happy that Cookiebot or user-centric Cookiebot has added that to the portfolio, because at Cookie Info we got a lot of questions around. I need a privacy policy. How do I set that up? Because working with cookies on your website is, of course, one part of the solution. So your cookie banner and your cookie declaration, which are the two separate things within the CMP offering of Cookiebot. But then also it comes to your privacy policy, which is a description of how you use the data that you obtain from your website users. So that addresses things like, of course, do you have a cookie banner? But do you do direct marketing? Are you collecting emails or phone numbers or that sort of stuff? I checked it out and I really like it. And once you've finished it, you get this nice, well, this privacy policy specific for your situation. So yeah, good job on that. Thanks.
Yeah, and with that, if there are any questions, then now would be a great time to ask them. I will go into the Q&A. I can see there's only a single question so far. Anonymous attendee asks, how is the scenario with multiple lawful bases handled, like consent plus legitimate interest for the collection and processing of cookies? Okay, so legitimate interest basically means, this is a legal term, that if your need for the data exceeds the need for privacy, I suppose you could say, then it's legal to collect consent. It's something that is specifically used in TCF, the Transparency and Consent Framework, which a lot of publishers use to sort of like serve ads on their website. How's the scenario with multiple bases handled? So the question is worded a little bit difficult, so I'm not exact. I might get this wrong. But yeah, Cookiebot does support TCF, so it can. So yeah, it basically, as you navigate around the banner, you can opt in and out of specific purposes, specific vendors, specific features, and then depending on your choice, that data is encoded in a string, like yeah, numbers and letters that aren't readable to a human, but they are to the TCF framework, and it gets added to your consent information. So when a visitor goes to a website and they consent, then these services, they basically ask, hey, am I allowed to collect their name or their IP address? And then they can look in that encoded string that came with the consent submission, and then figure out, am I allowed to do what I want to do? So in that regard, it is sort of like consent mode, but much more granular, because now we're talking about possibly 800 different vendors and 12 different features, no purposes, and 4 features, no 5. The numbers aren't very important, but these features and purposes are basically like technologies you're allowed to use. Like, can we use fingerprinting? Can we use your microphone? Can we, for what purposes can we collect this data? So this is basically handled by the TCF framework, which is part of Cookiebot. And like I said, consent mode is similar to it, but much more simple. Consent is denied. Okay, that must be an elaboration. So the consent is denied. So if a person opts out, say they deny everything, it's like no cookies whatsoever, then that gets recorded in this consent string, and then the servers will know, okay, I'm not allowed to use targeted advertising. I'm not allowed to collect personalized data so I can target them better next time. So then it becomes more of a generic approach. And if they've completely refused the provider, then the ads just won't load. So let's say the person said, I do not want Google Ads to know anything about me, then obviously you can't run the service.
Yeah.
Uh, the next question: if a user is using a VPN to access a website and the IP is not the actual IP of the country they're located in, how would that impact the dynamic opt-in screen? That is a good one and a tricky one at that, because yes, we do use IP lookup to determine your position. And I actually also I'm on a VPN right now. So my right now my well, the banner would think that I'm in Germany, I think, but I'm actually in Denmark. And yeah, then it would get it wrong. It would present me with the banner that fits that region. And there's unfortunately not really a way around this, because we can't sort of like use GPS data to pinpoint your location. And it would also become a little bit that then it becomes creepy if I literally actually know where you're physically located. It's okay that I can sort of like infer it from something that I already get, because as soon as you enter a website, it knows your IP address. This is how the internet works. It's basically knock knock, who's there? Hey, yeah, I'm Microsoft.com. Oh, hi, I am 192.168.0.1.
Yeah.
So that is pretty benign. So here, if someone has a VPN, we will probably serve them the wrong banner. I mean, that's yeah. There's
That's
nothing
part
we
of the
can do
game.
about that.
Yeah.
But legit. Okay, so this was again an addition to the previous one about TCF. But legitimate interest is ticked. Now, legitimate interest is on by default. So if even if they opt out, then legitimate interest is still on. That is yeah. It's legal as far as as I know, and that's again because if your need for the data is greater than the privacy requirements of the user, then then you will still be able to yeah, perform the services that are tied with the legitimate interest. But if people just opt out, right? So if they just smack that no thank you button, then legitimate interest is on. But they can actually go in, and that's the same for us and for our competitors, because this is a legal requirement. They can go in and manually uncheck all those boxes, and then it's game over. Then even legitimate interest doesn't go, because they have rights. So this is again the minimal compliance. If we say, okay, you just did a generic opt-out, that doesn't cover legitimate interest. But if you actually went in and literally said, I do not want you to be able to do those things, then we have to respect that.
Yeah.
Cross-domain consent doesn't work between parent and child subdomains. Okay, so let's say I have a website that sells, I'm a railroad, and I sell tickets. So my website is trains.com. And then when people try to order tickets, they get redirected to tickets.trains.com. And that doesn't work. The parent is not allowed to share data with its child. So no, tickets.trains.com is the child and trains.com is the parent. But the other way around is okay. Tickets.trains.com is allowed to pass their data to trains.com. Now, the easy way to fix that is to just make trains.com into www.trains.com, because then they share the same top level domain. And then that parent-child becomes a sibling situation. But for example, Cookiebot is a user-centric product. So we have www.cookiebot.com and we have usercentrics.com. These two cannot share data no matter what. The top level domain is they're not even related. So there's no child relation, there's no sibling relation, there's no relation whatsoever. That's just from the top level domains, because you cannot infer from these domains that these are actually the same company. So I hope that sort of like made it clear, and I can go back to that slide where I show it, because this is really yeah. So in the example I just gave, then support.cookiebot.com would be tickets.trains.com, and then trains.com would be the top. So you can see here the arrows flow upwards and side to side, but not down, as you can see in the I think that's the easy way to sort of like explain it. Like you can go up and you can go side to side, but you can't go down. I hope that makes sense, because this is a tricky thing.
We have to keep eye on our time, Richard, and we're getting some more questions.
Yeah, I'll speed through them. There's four.
Oh, you don't have to speed, but
What's a good benchmark for getting consent from the cookie banner? I'd say if you're over 80, 90%, then you're doing good. Like nobody gets 100, but if you're over 80, you're doing good. Do Cookiebot or user centers collect IP addresses before a user opts in? We don't collect them. We anonymize them and we store them in the consent log because you have to be able to document that you legally obtained consent. But we don't store them on our servers. We actually it's a matter of yeah, company policy. We try to get as little information as possible, only from our own users, never from their users, because then again it gives legal obligations. Can we trust the cookiebot tag template in Google Tag Manager when configuring? Yes. If you use Google Tag Manager, definitely get our tag because then it internally registers your consent mode settings.
Yep.
It's super easy to use. If you use Google Tag Manager, do yourself a favor, get that tag. It's maintained and created by our own people. It's legit. Get it. When it comes to advertising cookies, could there be any lawful basis other than consent? In other words, is it illegal to put different legal basis than consent in the cookie banner for the user to opt in? That is a very good question. This goes a little bit into the legitimate interest thing. So I'd say, yeah, if you have a legitimate interest, then yes. But this becomes pretty. This is more specialized than I'm comfortable answering. So I'd say probably, but I'm not 100% sure.
Me either.
Then the last question about cross-domain parents and child domains don't share cookies or consent. Cross-domain consent breaks here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct.
Yes, that is correct. So parents can share with their children, but children can share upwards. So that's how it works.
Yeah.
We ran out of questions and out of time, which is convenient. For those of you still watching, I hope you enjoyed our presentation. We went a little bit different than we usually did. I personally enjoyed it. Hope all of you did as well. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you again.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.